Hello everybody and welcome to my monthly Vietnam update. I wish you all a healthy, happy and prosperous 2025. In December, the Vietnamese stock market index remained relatively quiet with low liquidity and modest index gains. The VN index closed the month with a gain of 0.7%, bringing its 2024 performance to 7% in US dollar terms. The AFC Vietnam Fund also had a positive month with a gain of 4.1%, bringing its 2024 performance to 10.3%. The AFC Vietnam Fund is now only 7.3% below its peak set in March 2022, raising optimism that the new all-time high could be achieved in 2025. Hi, my name is Andreas Vogelsanger. I'm the CEO of the AFC Vietnam Fund. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel in order not to miss any updates. Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We are diving into some pretty fascinating stuff today. Vietnam's economic performance in 2024.
Oh, yeah.
We got this really in-depth economic report from December 2024.
Okay.
And frankly, some of these numbers are pretty eye-popping.
Yeah.
But the big question is, was it all hype?
Right.
Or did Vietnam truly have a breakout year?
Yeah.
And what does that mean for potential investments in 2025?
You know what's fascinating about this is that you see a lot of economies around the world struggling in 2024, and Vietnam just kind of shrugged it all off and powered forward.
Yeah.
This report kind of suggests that they might be onto something really special.
Okay, so let's get to the headline. That everyone's talking about a 7% GDP growth.
Yeah.
That's not just good. That's the highest in the region and one of the best Vietnam has seen in a decade.
Right.
But I'm curious, is that just a number?
Yeah.
Or is there something deeper going on here?
It's definitely more than just a number.
Okay.
You see, this growth happened despite, backdrop of global uncertainty. We had geopolitical tensions, economic slowdowns in major markets.
Yeah.
And yet, Vietnam managed to not only weather the storm, but actually thrive in it. That's a testament to their resilience and their ability to adapt and leverage their unique advantages.
So what exactly is fueling this economic engine?
Well,
The report dives into a few key factors.
okay.
One that jumped out at me is their record-breaking export turnover, exceeding $404 billion.
Wow.
That's a huge rebound from the dip they saw in 2023.
This is where Vietnam's strategic positioning as a global manufacturing hub really comes into play.
Right.
They've been quietly building this up for years.
Yep.
Combine that with a network of free trade agreements, and you've got a recipe for strong and sustained export growth.
It's like they've been laying the groundwork for this moment.
Right.
And now everything's clicking into place.
Yeah.
But it's not just about exports, right? The report also mentions a resurgence in industrial production.
Absolutely. After seeing a rather sluggish 3% growth in 2023, industrial production roared back to life in 2024, hitting a robust 8.3%.
Wow.
It's a clear sign that businesses are feeling confident and investing in expansion.
And I'm guessing that confidence is partly due to those supportive policies they've got in place, like those low interest rates we keep hearing about.
Right.
It's like they're creating the perfect environment for businesses to flourish.
Yeah.
But hold on, there's another piece of this puzzle that really caught my eye. Tourism.
Yeah.
I mean, 18 million international visitors in a single year.
Wow.
That's got to be a game changer.
Think about the impact that has on Vietnam's foreign reserves and their overall economic stability.
Yeah.
It's a massive influx of revenue.
Right.
And it helps diversify their economy beyond just manufacturing.
Yeah.
They're becoming a hot destination.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting.
Right.
The report highlights a surge in foreign direct investment, or FDI, reaching a record $24.8 billion.
Wow.
That's a 7% increase from 2023, which is impressive on its own.
Right.
But then you see who is investing, and it's like a who's who of global powerhouses.
Okay.
SpaceX, NVIDIA, even the Trump Organization.
Interesting.
What's going on here?
These aren't just random investments. They're strategic moves by some of the biggest players in the world.
Right.
SpaceX is setting up shop to manufacture equipment, a $1.5 billion investment.
Wow.
NVIDIA is doubling down on chip production,
Okay.
solidifying Vietnam's role in global tech supply chains. And the Trump Organization is diving headfirst into golf courses, hotels, and hospitality. It's a diverse portfolio of investments that shows serious long-term confidence in Vietnam.
But hold on a second. Something doesn't quite add up.
What's that?
If everything is so rosy, why didn't the Vietnamese stock market reflect this incredible economic growth?
Yeah.
The report mentions that the VN index actually underperformed. What's the deal with that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got this booming economy.
Right. But the stock market seems to be telling a different story.
Right.
There are two main factors at play here that we need to unpack.
Okay.
First, there was a wave of aggressive foreign selling, with investors pulling out a record $3.55 billion from the Vietnamese stock market.
But why would they do that with the economy doing so well?
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive.
It's not as strange as it seems. Remember those U.S. Treasury bonds?
Yeah.
Well, after the EV cut interest rates, those bonds started looking mighty attractive to investors.
Right.
They offered higher returns with arguably less risk.
Yeah.
So some investors likely shifted their money out of Vietnam and into those bonds. And then there were the leadership changes in Vietnam,
Right.
which, although common, may have spooked some investors.
So it's more about external factors and investor jitters than anything fundamentally wrong with Vietnam's economy itself.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, the second factor contributing to the stock market's underperformance is more internal.
Remember the real estate crisis of 2022?
Yeah.
Well, it's still having ripple effects leading to high non-performing loans, or NPLs, in the banking system.
So those are essentially loans that are not being repaid as expected.
Right.
Which is a red flag for investors.
Yeah.
Especially those who are more risk averse.
Precisely.
Okay.
The government did try to address these concerns with Circular 02, which was extended in June 2024.
Right.
It aimed to stabilize the financial system.
Yeah.
But investors, particularly local ones, remain cautious.
So what we have here is a fascinating paradox.
Yeah.
A booming economy on one hand,
Right.
but a somewhat sluggish stock market on the other. What does this mean for someone like you listening in
Right.
who might be considering Vietnam as a potential investment destination in 2025?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
This disconnect could actually be a golden opportunity for savvy investors. If you look at the bigger picture, Vietnam's economic fundamentals are incredibly strong.
Right.
This stock market underperformance might just be a temporary blip.
Okay.
Those who are willing to take a longer-term view, who are not spooked by short-term fluctuations, could find themselves well-positioned to benefit from Vietnam's continued growth.
So let's talk about 2025.
All right.
What's the outlook?
Well,
Is this economic momentum expected to continue, or are we looking at a potential slowdown?
Well, according to the report, Vietnam is aiming for another 7% GDP growth in 2025.
Wow.
Which would keep them among the top performers globally.
So they're really going for it.
Yeah.
What are the drivers of this continued growth?
Essentially the same factors that fueled their success in 2024.
Okay.
Exports, FDI, consumption, and public investment.
So it's like they've hit their stride.
Right.
And they're not slowing down.
Yeah.
That 7% target is ambitious. Especially considering the global economic climate. What makes them so confident they can pull it off?
Right. Well, there's a strong possibility that the shift in production from China to Vietnam could accelerate even further, especially with Trump back in the White House.
Oh, interesting.
His policies might create additional incentives for companies to diversify their supply chains away from China.
Right.
And guess who's perfectly positioned to benefit from that shift?
Vietnam.
Exactly.
It's like they're in the right place at the right time, and they're making the most of it.
Yeah.
Okay, we've talked a lot about exports driving growth. But what about domestic consumption?
Okay.
I know it's been somewhat subdued in recent years.
Right.
But is that about to change?
The report predicts a strong rebound in consumer spending in 2025.
Really?
After 2 years of holding back,
Yeah.
people are ready to spend again.
Do we have any specific examples of this consumption recovery in action?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The report highlights 2 companies that perfectly illustrate this trend.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the details.
First, there's Thien Long Group, or TLG, Vietnam's largest stationery manufacturer.
Oh.
They went through a rough patch with 6 consecutive quarters of declining profits. But they smartly restructured their operations, focusing on high-margin products like creative art books for children.
So they adapted to changing consumer demands.
Right.
And found a winning formula.
Yeah.
What was the result?
Their profits soared to record highs.
Wow.
And their stock price followed suit, surging over 40% in just 2 months.
That's incredible.
That's a clear sign of consumer confidence returning.
That's a compelling example. What about the second company?
The second company is Hang Zan Services Company, or HAX,
Okay.
the largest Mercedes-Benz dealer in Vietnam.
So we're talking about the luxury car market.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good indicator of consumer sentiment.
Exactly.
Right.
They started investing in HAX in the third quarter of 2023, when its net profit had hit rock bottom.
Right.
They anticipated a strong growth in luxury car consumption in an emerging market like Vietnam.
And did their prediction come true?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Over the past year, HAX's net profit has recovered significantly, driving its stock price higher. This demonstrates that consumer confidence is back and people are willing to spend on premium goods and experiences.
This is all great news for Vietnam's economy.
Yeah.
But for those of us looking at potential investment opportunities,
Right.
where should we be focusing our attention in 2025?
The report highlights 3 key sectors: export, consumption, and public investment.
Okay.
These are the areas where we're likely to see the most significant growth and return on investment.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
These are all areas that have already shown strong performance in 2024.
Right.
And the momentum is expected to continue.
Exactly.
So it sounds like Vietnam's economy is firing on all cylinders.
It is.
But I'm curious, with all this talk of economic growth and investment opportunities, what does it mean for Vietnam's overall position in the world?
Yeah.
How will this economic success story impact its role on the global stage?
That's a great question, and it's something I think we need to consider carefully.
Yeah.
Vietnam's economic rise is undeniable, and it's already attracting attention from major players like the U.S. and China.
Right.
The question is, how will Vietnam navigate this new landscape?
Yeah.
Will it align more closely with one superpower or the other, or will it chart its own course?
That is a fascinating question, and one that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on. But for you listening in, think about this. How might Vietnam's continued economic success impact its geopolitical standing in the region and globally? It's something to ponder as we head into part 2 of this deep dive.
It's a complex dance they'll have to master, playing both sides without losing their own footing. But let's be honest, you probably aren't just here for the geopolitical drama. You want to know where the opportunities are, right?
You read my mind.
Yeah.
We've established that Vietnam's economy is robust, and the outlook for 2025 is positive. But for those of us who might be interested in actually exploring investment opportunities, where do we even start?
Well,
what specific sectors or companies should we be looking at?
Well, as we touched on earlier, this report highlights 3 key sectors for 2025.
Okay.
Export, consumption, and public investment.
Okay.
Think of these as the engines driving Vietnam's growth.
Okay, let's break those down a bit.
All right.
Starting with exports, what specific industries are fueling this growth?
Well, Vietnam has become a manufacturing powerhouse for a wide range of goods.
Okay.
Everything from electronics and textiles to footwear and furniture.
Wow.
They're even a significant player in the global agricultural market, exporting rice, coffee, and seafood.
So it's not just one trick they're relying on.
Right,
It's a diversified export portfolio, which is always a good sign for stability.
Yeah.
But what about consumption?
Yeah.
We know domestic spending is expected to rebound strongly, but where are those dollars going to be spent?
Keep your eye on the rising middle class in Vietnam. They're the ones driving this consumption growth.
Right.
They're spending more on things like travel, entertainment, dining out. All those things that signal a rising standard of living.
So it's not just about basic necessities anymore.
Right.
It's a shift towards a more sophisticated consumer market,
Yeah.
which opens up opportunities for businesses offering premium products and experiences.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of public investment.
Right.
The government is pouring money into infrastructure projects,
Uh-huh.
transportation, energy, telecommunications,
Yeah.
all those things that lay the foundation for long-term growth.
Right, because those public investments have a ripple effect,
Yeah.
creating opportunities not just in construction and engineering,
Mm-hmm.
but also in all those related industries that benefit from improved infrastructure.
Right.
It's like building the highways that allow the economic engine to run even faster.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that these sectors are all interconnected.
Right.
Improvements in transportation infrastructure, for example, make it easier for businesses to export their goods, which in turn fuels economic growth and further boosts consumer spending.
Yeah.
It's a virtuous cycle.
It really sounds like Vietnam is firing on all cylinders.
It is.
But let's zoom in even further.
Okay.
What are some specific companies that investors might want to consider?
All right.
We've already touched on Thien Long Group, TLG, and Hang Zan Services Company, HAX.
Yeah.
But are there others?
Those are definitely two great examples of companies that are adapting to changing market dynamics and capitalizing on emerging opportunities.
Right.
But let's add another name to the list. Vingroup, Vietnam's largest conglomerate.
Okay.
They're involved in everything from real estate and automotive manufacturing to retail and technology.
Wow.
They're a real force in Vietnam.
Vingroup is doing some really interesting things.
Yeah.
Especially in the electric vehicle market with their VinFast brand.
They're pushing boundaries for sure.
Yeah.
VinFast isn't just producing electric cars.
Right. They're making electric scooters and buses too.
Wow.
They have their sights set on becoming a global player in the EV market.
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly have the resources and ambition to make it happen.
That's impressive.
Yeah,
It sounds like Vietnam is becoming a real hub for entrepreneurial activity.
it is.
Are there any other up-and-coming companies investors should have on their radar,
Sure.
especially in that tech sector you mentioned earlier?
Definitely Vietnam's tech sector is buzzing with activity.
Okay.
Companies like FPT Software,
Mm-hmm.
a global IT services provider,
Mm-hmm.
and Momo, a leading mobile payment platform,
Right.
are experiencing explosive growth.
Wow.
They're ones to watch for sure.
So there's a lot to be excited about in Vietnam.
There is.
But let's be realistic.
Yeah,
With any investment, it's crucial to do your homework
right.
and understand the risks involved.
Absolutely. Vietnam is still an emerging market,
Right.
which means there are inherent risks.
Okay.
Political and economic instability, regulatory changes, currency fluctuations.
Yeah. These are all factors to consider.
It's a reminder that past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results,
Right.
no matter how promising things look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Investing in Vietnam requires careful research,
Mm-hmm.
a long-term perspective, and a tolerance for some bumps along the way.
So for someone listening in who's intrigued by Vietnam's economic story and might be considering dipping their toes into the investment waters,
Yeah.
what's the best way to get started?
Well,
Where do they even begin?
well, do your research.
Okay.
Dive deep into specific companies and sectors that align with your investment goals and risk tolerance.
Right.
There's a wealth of information out there. Consulting with a financial advisor who specializes in emerging markets can also be incredibly valuable.
Always a good idea to get some expert guidance before making any big decisions.
Yes.
But even beyond the financial aspects,
Okay.
I'm curious about the broader implications of all this.
All right.
We've talked about Vietnam's economic rise, but what about its impact on the geopolitical landscape?
That's where things get really fascinating.
Okay.
Vietnam's growing economic clout is giving them more leverage on the global stage.
Right.
They're becoming a key player in regional and international trade agreements, and they're strategically engaging with major powers like the U.S. and China.
Yeah.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It's like they're walking this tightrope between these major powers,
Yeah.
trying to maintain their independence while also forging strategic alliances.
Right.
They're not just along for the ride anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're shaping the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're playing their cards carefully, aiming to maximize their own economic and political interests.
Right.
It's a fascinating dynamic to watch unfold.
Speaking of watching, we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on Vietnam's progress in the coming months and years.
Yes.
But before we wrap up this part of the deep dive,
Okay.
any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think the key takeaway here is that Vietnam is a dynamic and rapidly growing economy with tremendous potential.
Yeah.
It's not without its risks, but for investors willing to do their homework and take a long-term view, Vietnam offers some truly compelling opportunities.
It's an exciting time to be watching Vietnam's economic journey unfold.
It is.
But I have to ask, what about the potential downsides?
Okay.
Could this rapid growth lead to unforeseen social or environmental challenges? That's something I'm curious to explore further.
That's an excellent point and a perfect segue into the final part of our deep dive where we'll examine those very questions. Stay tuned.
It's incredible to think about how much Vietnam has already achieved. But, like you just mentioned, there's always another side to the story.
Right.
As Vietnam continues on this upward trajectory, are there potential downsides
Yeah.
we should be considering?
You're absolutely right to think about that, every boom has its challenges.
Yeah.
One potential hurdle for Vietnam is maintaining its competitive edge as wages rise. It's a natural consequence of economic growth.
Yeah,
Living standards improve and labor costs go up.
that makes sense. It's a good problem to have in a way, but it's still something they'll need to manage carefully.
Right.
What strategies could they use to stay competitive in that scenario?
Well, there are a few paths they could take. One is focusing on increasing productivity,
Mm-hmm.
getting more output for each unit of labor.
Okay.
Another option is moving up the value chain,
Right.
shifting from producing low margin goods to focusing on higher value products and services.
So basically, they need to stay ahead of the curve and constantly innovate to maintain their edge.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What other challenges do you see potentially popping up as Vietnam continues on this rapid growth path?
Another big one is managing the environmental impact of all this economic activity. As Vietnam industrializes and more people move to urban centers,
Yeah.
it's crucial to prioritize sustainable development.
It's like finding that sweet spot
Right.
where economic progress and environmental responsibility go hand in hand. Because what good is all this growth if it ends up undermining their natural resources and harming the environment in the long run?
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's the geopolitical tightrope walk we talked about earlier.
Right.
As Vietnam's economic and political influence grows, they'll need to carefully manage their relationships with major powers like the U.S. and China.
Right.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It's like they're playing a high-stakes game of chess,
Yeah.
trying to anticipate moves and counter moves
Yeah.
while also staying true to their own goals and values.
Exactly.
It's a lot to juggle.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
But Vietnam has a long history of resilience and strategic thinking.
Mm-hmm.
They've navigated difficult situations before, and I'm confident they'll find a way to navigate these challenges as well.
So for you listening in, it's not all sunshine and roses.
Right.
There are real challenges on the horizon for Vietnam, but there's also this incredible sense of potential. It's a country on the move, and it's going to be fascinating to see what they do next.
Absolutely. And that's what makes following Vietnam's journey so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just about the numbers, it's about the people, the culture, the ambition.
Mm-hmm.
They're writing their own story,
Yeah.
and it's one worth paying attention to.
Well said. This has been a truly insightful deep dive into Vietnam's economic landscape. We've uncovered the driving forces behind their boom, explored potential investment opportunities, and even grappled with the complex challenges that lie ahead. But as we wrap up,
Yeah.
what's the one key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
More than anything, I hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity about Vietnam. It's a country that often gets overlooked, but as we've seen, it's a place of immense potential and dynamism.
Right.
So stay curious, stay informed,
Yeah.
and who knows, maybe you'll even find yourself drawn to explore the opportunities that Vietnam has to offer.
I couldn't agree more. A huge thanks to you for joining us on this fascinating exploration of Vietnam's economic boom. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's sure to get you thinking. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those questions coming.